Hello, everyone, and welcome to the monthly Intermountain West Drought Briefing for April 16th, 2024. My name is Adam Lang, and I'm the Communications Coordinator for NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS. I'm also affiliated with the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences at CU Boulder. I'm filling in today for Gretel Follingstad, who is the Intermountain West Regional Drought Information Coordinator. These Intermountain West drought briefings are held in partnership with all 5 states in the region, including Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. Before we get started, please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and a brief summary will be available on drought.gov and the NIDIS YouTube channel later this week. We'll send an email around when the recording is available. Also, you can submit questions into the question box at any time. The presentations will be followed also by a Q&A. We have a great pair of speakers this week. First up is Dave Dubois, New Mexico State climatologist based at New Mexico State University. Dave will discuss the current conditions and the drought outlook. After Dave will be Katie Getz with the New Mexico Department of Agriculture, who will present on New Mexico Healthy Soil Program. And now I am going to turn the mic over to Dave.
All right, thank you, Adam. We're going to get started, talk about where we were, where we are, and possibly what's coming in the next few months. So let's go on to the next slide there, I think. All right. So we can advance to the next one. All right, great, thanks. So this is our map of the U.S. Drought Monitor. It's the one that's updated every Thursday morning, and this one was updated. Whoop, go back one, and just showing you the extent of the drought. If you can go back one more slide, showing there we go. Showing you the extent of the drought all the way from Wyoming down to the Mexico border. As you can see, the worst impacts are down in southern New Mexico, where we've got a swath of D3 that runs all the way from Arizona to Texas, and then the other areas in the far north in Wyoming, we've got a little patch of D2 over in the Bighorn Mountains up there, and then there's another swath of D1 across the northeast part of Wyoming, and there's a few areas of D0 across the Utah and Colorado and Arizona, and little spots here. If you go to the next slide, is look at the change over the current water year to see how many class changes we've seen, and if they're brown, which means it's gotten worse over the course of the water year, and if it's in the green, the blue, those are improvements in the U.S. Drought Monitor classifications. As you can see, across southern Arizona and parts of New Mexico, we've seen 2 to 3 class improvements over some areas. However, and in the same way with southwest Colorado. However, if you go further north, we've seen some degradations in the drought, little spots here and there, but you can see that area in northern Wyoming where it's gotten worse over the course of the water year. So if we can hit the next slide, and we can talk about the climate. This is the average temperature. So on the left side, we've got the average temperature, the rankings of the last March, so the March 2024, and on the right is the water year temperature from, remember the water year is from October, so that's October, November, December, January, February, March percentile. So if you can look at the left side, there's a lot of areas of the Intermountain West are either in that kind of the far south into Arizona, we got a little bit below average temperatures. However, if we go further north into Colorado and Wyoming, we see some above average temperatures. And then on the right is kind of the big story, is more of the warming. So there's really, I don't really see, I maybe a couple little spots in Cochise County maybe, where there was a below average, but pretty much most everywhere across the whole western U.S. has been above average to in a few areas that are much above average. And just as some stats here, I was just looking at the winter, which is the meteorological winter, December, January, February. Utah had their 5th warmest winter. Wyoming had their 7th warmest winter. Colorado their 8th. Arizona their 17th, and New Mexico had their 13th warmest winter, defined by December, January, February. So it's been a warm winter. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about precip over the same two time spans. So on the left shows March, and on the right shows the water year precipitation. So as you can see, there's a lot of above average. That's that kind of that teal kind of color, much above. And there's a couple little spots that are record wettest over in some of the Intermountain West in the Rockies and central Colorado. However, not everywhere it's the same. As you can see, there's a few areas of southeast Colorado it's below average, as well as that same area where we saw on the U.S. Drought Monitor in northern Wyoming, we saw some below average precip for March. And then if you go to the right, very similar story, just not as impactful. We saw the same areas that were above average across March that were similar across the whole water year. Same in the other story was that northeast part of Wyoming has been dry up there, and we'll kind of see that in the basin snow water equivalent over in the borderings the Dakotas. So if you go to the next slide, we'll be talking about snow, because that's kind of the story for this time of year. We want to know because we get our surface water and recharge and into our aquifers. So this is a map of the snow water equivalent across the Intermountain West and a little more as of a day ago. And so you can see the impact of our winter storms. And as you go from the south, you see some really big numbers, because some of those numbers on the south, a lot of times this late in the season, you usually get melt out, and we've gotten some snow to add on that. So that's why there's like that southern New Mexico, southeast Arizona is over 2,000%, because normally this time of year it would have been melted out, but we've got a little bit of snow hanging on there. As you go further north, the numbers still remain well above average. So there's light areas across all of Colorado, 96 to 105%. And then we go into a different story up in Wyoming. As you can see, like the Bighorn Basin, it's 86% a median. The Powder Basin is about 75, Tongue Basin 74, and Upper Yellowstone about 70. And as you go over to the east side, which some of the lower elevations like the Belle Fourche, 21% of average, and then down in that other area below that, the 27% average of the Cheyenne, that's the Black Hills. There's usually, I think there's only one snowtail site representing those two. Some interesting facts here. I was just looking at some of the snowtail stations. I just looked at one or two in each state. There's one that piqued my interest over just to the northeast of Ogden in Utah. There's that, it has currently, as of this morning, actually last night, has 53 inches of snow water equivalent still in the mountains up there, and that's 158% of median. So there's quite a bit of snow in the snowpack up there. If you go into Wyoming, we've got over in the Tetons, we've got one site that has about 40 inches of SWE, and then one up in Colorado, just to the east of Steamboat Springs, has 42 inches of SWE in the storage up there. And then not forgetting New Mexico, where I am, one of our high elevation sites, and just to the east of Taos, we've got 20 inches of SWE up there, and we're seeing some melt out. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to go through the snow water equivalent, another representation. This is just a modeled version of that same map, but just looking at the terrain, kind of seeing, I think it's a really nice visual just to show the SWE, the colors there. The dark blue is about 8 to 12, and then as you get into the teal, 12 or more inches of SWE, just kind of giving you a visual where you are in relative to how much snow is still in the mountains up there, or we're starting to see some significant melt out, and especially the southern mountain ranges. So go next slide. We're gonna go through the statewide SWE across all of the snowtail stations and all the basins. So across Wyoming, you can see the black line is the current SWE across the state, and as you can see, that little X there, that green X, that's the peak of the SWE. So we hit that, and you can see the melt out starting to go. But they've been pretty much close to the median all year, but a little slightly below. If you go to the next slide, got another state. We're going to talk about Colorado. Same kind of story. They've been hugging the median pretty much the whole water year. Started off a little bit below, but then following it and above average. And then you can see that tailing out over that decrease, that black line going down. That's starting to see that melt out this time of year. And then that's normal, kind of see that. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to do a different state. We're going to go into, I think, Utah. There we go. Very similar story. However, they've been above average ever since like right around February. They've been above average, above median, and so they're just started out their melt out across. And remember, this is a statewide across a bunch of snowtail, 114 sites. So if you go to next slide, we're going to cover Arizona. Different story, further south. So you can see the impacts of warming across from December, January, and then we got a big bump up right beginning of the spring. But then it's been interesting, similar to New Mexico. We've seen that carryover. We've gotten some snow to kind of push us out further into our snow season, which is great. Getting snow further than we usually get in compared to the median. Good news. And if you go to the next one, I think I'm going to cover the Rio Grande Basin, which impacts, it's actually in Colorado, but impacts the surface water in New Mexico. We've been following the median line. However, we're below that a little bit, 80% throughout pretty much most all of the water year. And just recently into end of March, we've gotten above the median, and now we're starting to see that tail off, that melt out. So we're looking forward to seeing the water coming down the Rio Grande into tributaries as well, the Chama and all those other rivers coming out. So next slide, please. And we're going to be talking about reservoir storages. So this is a map from the NRCS website, looking at the different storages. So the green bars is the median, the long-term average, 1991 to 2020 average. And then the blue is the current, and this is as of April 1st. This is the reservoir storages by state. As you can see, all the states except New Mexico have storage this year higher than the median. And you can see New Mexico there is, they colored that kind of reddish because it's below median, and it's below the median as well. And so, for instance, we've got one of our biggest reservoirs in the region, Elephant Butte, is currently, as of today, it's about 21% full. It's a little better than last year. However, it's still not good. Last year we had 18% this day last year. And so other good stories are around the other part of the Intermountain West. However, New Mexico is still struggling with drought. We're further south, and we're seeing impacts of that drought on our storage. So next slide. And we've got storage. I'm just going to show one of the storages on the Colorado. We won't have time to go through all of the basins, but this is just over on the right is the upper Colorado, and the left is the lower Colorado. Just kind of give you some numbers. Some of the large reservoirs like Flaming Gorge is 86% full, and Lake Powell on the upper Colorado is 33% full. And as you go down in the lower basin, Lake Mead is 36% full. Just as the outlooks and forecasts, and we're going to start migrating to that area. The inflow to the Navajo Reservoir, which is over here on the right, kind of bottom right, the outlook for that is about 80% of median for the spring runoff. So we'd love to see higher numbers, but we'll take what we get. 80% is good. However, on the over on the Rio Grande, which I'm not showing here, but it was the stream flow forecast inflow into Elephant Butte is at 66% of median. That's that April through July runoff. So it was much worse earlier. Last month's runoff forecast was much worse, and it's actually improved since we've gotten a bump up in the snowpack, and which is great. So next slide, please. All right, so let's look at the outlook. So this is a familiar graph to folks who have been on other NIDIS webinars. This is the probabilistic El Nino Southern Oscillation forecast. And there's three different color bars here. There's a red, gray, and blue. The red is the probabilities for the El Nino. The gray is the probabilities for neutral, and then the blue is the probabilities for La Nina. So you can kind of just look for your on the bottom of the graph here, the probabilities are currently we're still in the El Nino, but we're quickly transitioning to neutral. And as you can see, the gray bars diminishing, and then the blue bars starting to grow in the probability. So that's the probabilities increasing for La Nina climbs over 70% by this summer, and this is kind of what the reason why we're showing this is kind of really gives us an indicator of what could drive our climate or short-term climate over the next several months. So if you go to the next, we're going to show some maps of so how does this pan out. So we'll start short-term, and then we'll go out a little longer. So to go out the next through the 24th of April, the 6 to 10 day on the temperature on the left and precip on the right. So looks like we've got, if you're further to the west, we got above average temperatures. If you're in pretty much most of Intermountain West is going to be above average. And then over on the right showing the precip, a little more precip probability if you're further south and it's more in the south central region, but most of Colorado and most of New Mexico is still in that probability is inching a little bit wetter. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk the next going out to the end of April, the 1814 day outlook, showing pretty much same story for temperatures above average. So that's kind of the story here, just kind of seeing that red, above average. But pretty much the whole West and even more than maybe 2/3 of the country have a higher probability of seeing some above average precipitation. Not real strong, but it looks like it's your odds are tending toward a little bit wetter than average. So if you go to the next slide, go a little further out and going out to the 3 to 4 weeks. So this is going into at the end of the second or the first week of May, equal chances. So your best bet for temperatures are near climatological averages, but the precip looks like it's kind of tending toward wetter for the Southwest and then the southern parts of the Intermountain West area. So let's go out a little further. Next slide. We'll kind of go further out in the outlook to April, May, June. So it's kind of the rest of the spring and kind of inching toward the summer. And that same signal out there for a lot of the West is above average temperatures. Few areas in Arizona and Wyoming and the Northeast Colorado are about equal chances, and so which is good. If there's any lingering snow, we don't want a really high melt out. So however, we got above average in southern New Mexico, southeast New Mexico, and then that signal pops up. I just noticed that. I just this below average precipitation probabilities for New Mexico, kind of giving you a heads up on that kind of stays with us a little further past June. However, we're seeing above average precip going up into Wyoming. So let's go to the summer, and this is going a little further out, but next slide, kind of looking at the summer outlook. So, okay, here we go. So on the left, we've got above average temperatures, not a real happy signal. We don't want a repeat of last year. I'm not saying it will, but it looks like a probability is inching toward above average on the temperature side, and then drier for pretty much all of the Intermountain West for June, July, and August. And so this is the Climate Prediction Center's forecast outlook really for that area for the summer. And I think it also jives. I took a peek look at some of the European model. It basically has a very similar signature for that area. So We'll see how that goes. You know, stay tuned for the next months to see if that stays there. I'm pretty sure that warming is going to be there, but I'm not sure. We'll see if that dry signal stays with us, and we don't want to see that. We need that precip. But if you go to the next slide, which is the drought outlook, the seasonal drought outlook, pretty much if you're that brown areas, that chocolate areas, if you're in drought, you're going to stay in drought, and that persists. In a few areas up in Wyoming, drought there's some removal and maybe some improvements. So that's some good signal, good signs for northern Wyoming, and same way with Arizona. Removal likely in some areas, and maybe it stays with us but improves a bit. So, however, the parts of New Mexico not so lucky. So that's pretty much all I have to talk about. The next slide is, I think, my ending slide. Appreciate it. Here's my email. Get in contact me if you have more questions, and we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dave. Our next speaker again is Katie Getz, who will present on the New Mexico Healthy Soil Program.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, and thanks to Nidus for the invitation to share a bit about NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. I've got just 9 slides, so it should be a fairly short presentation, leaving time for questions and answers here at the end for both Dave and me. But what I'll be talking about in brief is, what is soil health? Why does it matter? How can it be improved, especially with a little nudge from NMDA's Healthy Soil Program? Before we skip on to the next slide, I will help to manage your expectations. As co-lead of NMDA's Healthy Soil Program, my share of the program really relates to the communications and outreach of the program. Boy, is that work cut out for me there. My co-lead, my fellow co-lead, Dean Bruce, who's not on today with me, he's the technical whiz of the program. Grew up in production agriculture as I did, but he still maintains a foothold in that world, and also he has a decade's worth of experience in natural resources management. So when people approach us and say, hey, gosh, I really want to plant a cover crop in order to improve my soil health, I recede into the hedges and I let Dean take it from there. So really what I'll be talking about with you today, again, in brief, is just these 3 topics that in the center of your screen there. Next slide, please, Adam. And forgive me, I think I'm on a bit of delay because of low bandwidth here. So just a basic question, what is soil health? You'll notice we pull from USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. NRC is a huge partner for NMDA's Healthy Soil Program in a technical sense for sure, but also in a financial sense. They contribute financially to our program every year because we walk hand in glove in New Mexico when it comes to soil health improvement. So we borrow their definition. Soil health is the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. And I just think that definition is so pithy and so elegant. And every time I read it, I seem to home in on a new word that really for me is the center of that definition. And I keep coming back to recently this word continued. And you'll see why here in our next slide, please. Again, apologies for my delay on my end because of low bandwidth. I'll first point to this image here on the left side of the screen, borrowed from the NRCS office out of Michigan. I've seen this presentation elsewhere and really strongly recommend it to you. If you go to your preferred search engine and type in rainfall simulator, this is what you ought to see pictures of. And if you ever have the chance to see the rainfall simulator in action in person, I cannot recommend it enough. So I'll just describe briefly for you what's within that picture. It's 5 different soil samples, essentially just scraped from different pieces of land that are managed under different circumstances. And the buckets below will show you what percolates down through the soil. The more you see percolating through the soil, the healthier your soil is. And of course, the cleaner it is, the healthier your soil is. What you don't want to see is water coming off the front of those 5 panels that are kind of at a cant, they're canted, you don't want to see water coming off because that represents the runoff. So it's a really good presentation if you ever get the chance or have a chance to pop over to an internet browser and check out a video on YouTube. It really demonstrates a lot about soil health. So the healthier the soil, the better it can do its many jobs, absorbing and storing water. I'm thinking back to the slides that Dave showed where precipitation is expected for at least New Mexico in April and May, and we've got a dry summer in store. So the more we can sock away in what looks to be a hopeful set of weeks coming up here soon, the better we'll be in terms of our resilience to drought coming up. Of course, the healthier the soil, the better it can sustain diverse, productive plant and animal life, the better it can provide that physical stability for plant roots. And last but not least, the better it can store and transform and cycle that good NPK that all of our farmers are very familiar with. Next slide, please. So we've got what soil health is under our belts, why it matters, how can you improve it? Our program is built around the 5 soil health principles that you see on the screen here, and apologies for the formatting. I think it varies from computer to computer. But these are the ones that are scripted for us within the Healthy Soil Act. That's the legislation passed back in 2019, enacted in 2019, that serves as the basis for our program. So I'll just go through these very briefly. That the first principle is to keep the soil covered. I tend to think of that as the roof on the house. So the people inside the house are less safe, less healthy if there are problems with their roof. So we want to keep the soil covered in order to maintain all that good life beneath the soil surface. Principle number 2 is minimizing disturbance on cropland and minimizing external inputs. So if we had to pick a single word to really summarize this principle, it would be tillage. So encouraging the minimization of tillage is a really strong thrust related to principle number 2. Principle number 3, maximizing biodiversity. And here, I think what is meant for our program specifically is as it relates to plants, that as life grows above the soil, so it grows below the soil. So we really want to see a diversity in the plant matter grown on our soil surfaces. Number 4, maintaining a living root. The greater the duration of the year that you can be growing something in the ground, be it a cash crop or a cover crop, the more biological activity is happening beneath that soil surface, the better that all the life residing beneath the soil and above the soil will be for that fact. Last but not least, we get a call out for animals within our program. Not all sets of soil health principles specifically call out the integration of animals, but our program does, the law does, undergirding our program. So the 5th and final principle is to integrate animals into land management. And you can read with me there that the principle calls out animals as large as those that graze on the landscape to those as small, but still no less significant. So species, even earthworms, are called out in the legislation creating our program. Best thing about these principles, they are universal, they are scalable. So whether you are in a backyard, you're managing a backyard garden, let's say in the heart of Albuquerque, or you've got a great big ranch somewhere in northeastern New Mexico where the grass is really lush, these principles are something that you can adapt for yourself because again, they're universal and they're something that you can scale up or scale down. So I'll show you a few examples here on the next slide. And Adam, I apologize, I'm not seeing any movement on my end. But there's some, there we go, thank you. So some really nice pictures here. Again, these are just examples. So because the principles, and I'll back us up one, please, Adam, to those 5 pictures, please, just demonstrating the soil health principles in action. And as I mentioned, those principles are both universal and they are scalable. So what a person might do on their piece of land to put, the principle of keeping the soil covered, what they might do might look very different from what their neighbor might do. So again, these are just examples to give you a taste of what we mean when we say what the soil health principles look like when you apply them to the landscape. There at the top left, you'll see a nice picture of strip tillage, and you'll see that there's plant residue left behind between those rows. That is literally keeping the soil covered to protect all that good biological activity occurring underneath the soil surface. That second picture, middle top row there, this is something, a picture I took at New Mexico State University at one of the research farms that the university operates. And they're applying various mixtures of biochar and compost to various mixtures of cover crop to see what the optimum blend of all those things is. So applying biochar would help to boost your soil organic matter and necessarily preclude some of the application of some of the synthetics, some of the external inputs that a grower might otherwise be tempted to apply to their land. At the top right of the screen, you'll see a really nice butterfly picture there. Planting pollinator habitat, perfect way for people to maximize their biodiversity. So they're maximizing the diversity of their plants, and necessarily it serves as an invitation to help maximize the diversity of the animals on that landscape. Moving to the bottom row of photos there at the left, the hands of a researcher very familiar to our program, Dr. John Idawu, who's conducting some of the research funded through our program. But here he's basically taking a touch of all of the fall covers that he's planted. So again, maximizing the length of the calendar, the duration of the calendar, where there's a living root, exuding all of that good material beneath the soil surface to feed that biological activity. So there he's again working those fall cover crops. Last picture there on the bottom right is the integration of animals into land management, and that picture pretty well speaks for itself. We'll go to the next slide, please. So great question. How do you know which soil health principle to implement? You've got 5 of them, and that may seem overwhelming, especially to a person who's just kind of dipping a toe into the waters of soil health management. So what we advise people to do when they come to NMDA's Healthy Soil Program seeking a grant to improve their soil health, we say, first things first, figure out what's going on on the ground, on the land beneath your feet. So identify the natural resource concerns related to the soil on the land that you manage. And just to spell it out, a resource concern is simply, it's a degradation of a natural resource. And for our program, of course, we're talking soil here, but that degradation limits the intended use of the soil or the sustainability of the soil. That's what we would call a resource concern. So some examples there just listed for you at the bottom of the screen. Erosion depicted very nicely in that picture to the right there. Compaction, an issue, of course. Depleted organic matter, concentration of salts, loss or degradation of soil organism habitat, and loss of good soil structure. All of those would constitute a resource concern within your soil. And once you know, again, the challenge on the soil, or within the soil on the land that you manage, you can move forward from there and decide which of the soil health principles, usually it's more than one, but which of the soil health principles makes the most sense to really focus your time and energy around. Next slide, please. Just a brief bit of information about how our program actually plays out here in New Mexico. We've got 2 different applicant types who can seek grant funding from the program. And I'll focus your attention on that second column, which speaks to our eligible entities. And those are local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. That definition is chiseled in stone in the legislation creating our act. And that legislation also calls out very specifically the pueblos, the tribes, the nations in New Mexico, as well as the acequias, the land grants, soil and water conservation districts, and even NMSU's Cooperative Extension Service. But we've also welcomed grant application from other parties that fit that definition scripted into the law. And I'm thinking most notably of a conservancy district that approached us for some funding. They fit the bill of being a local governmental entity. They have proven land management capacity, so we gave them a grant to help them in their pursuit of healthier soil. Some unique requirements to those eligible entities that if they are set up to do business with the federal government, we believe that they are capable of handling large grants. So those parties can apply for up to $100,000 per project per year. Otherwise, the limit there you see is $25,000. I'll skip ahead and talk on the individual applicant side, and then we'll come back and finish out the rest of the chart. So that's just a bit on the eligible entities, those local governmental entities I just spoke of. But on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see our individual applicants, and those are basically everybody else, the non-governmental parties that nonetheless manage land in New Mexico and have a desire to improve it. So whether you're an individual in New Mexico, a business in New Mexico, a nonprofit in New Mexico, if you're directly engaged in farming, ranching, or another form of land management, maybe you're managing for wildlife, we will certainly entertain a grant application from you with a couple of stipulations that are noted in the box just beneath that. We require that you complete conservation planning with NRCS. Again, that's to help you identify those soil health related resource concerns on the land you manage. And the second part is administrative. We require that you find a project sponsor in your soil and water conservation district or your tribal government. And that's simply so that we can partner up in a financial sense. So without that project sponsor, we at the state agency cannot dole out dollars to those non-governmental parties. Skipping ahead now to our application cycle, you will notice that we are on the cusp of closing this year's application cycle. It ends 1 week from this Friday at noon, and we don't accept late applications. We don't accept incomplete applications. So I wanted to call that out for you in case you're sitting on today's call going, oh my gosh, I'm just now hearing of this program for the first time. Do I have time? If you're an eligible entity, you might have time. If you're an individual applicant, it's too late to complete conservation planning. So we'll see you again this time next year, but wanted to let you know that this year's cycle is just about wrapping up. So we're encouraging people who are hearing of our program for the first time, take a look at next year's cycle. And the way to get your ducks in a row, I've spelled that out at the bottom of the screen, is first pick your project site. So probably with the dollars available, you won't have funding enough to treat all of the acres you manage. So pick a project site, maybe something, a piece of land that's really close to where you tend to spend a lot of time, making it very accessible to you. Or maybe it's a site that you want to really try something on. It's a great piece of land and you want to see if you can nudge it to be something better. From there, we advise people to identify those highest priority soil health related resource concerns, as I mentioned, and for those individual applicants, that has to be done in partnership with NRCS. Next slide, please. So now that I've brought you a bit of information about NMDA's Healthy Soil Program, I want to let you know that ours is not the only state with such a program. So I borrowed this map from Nerds for Earth, it's called. That's a website that I'll drop in the chat here shortly, but invite you to check that out. It's a crowdsourced website. And I think the information that's been supplied for New Mexico's program comes from a party very familiar to us, the Healthy Soil Working Group here in New Mexico, who we credit with the strong support for the legislation that created our program. And also to their credit, they still run a really good nonprofit that offers various events and outreach to parties with an interest in soil health. But you'll see there that 26 states, according to this website, 26 states have passed some type of legislation that would improve their soil health. And they mentioned Pennsylvania by name, that they're implementing a similar program through an existing law as opposed to having passed new legislation to get it done. So that was current as of a couple of months ago. But again, I'll drop that that link in the chat in just a moment. And next slide, I believe it's my final one, Adam. And indeed it is. So this is something I'll also put in the chat, is just a link to our program homepage, where we invite people, whether you think you might apply for a grant or you just want to be plugged into a source where you can tap into some soil health news, some soil health events, maybe some other funding opportunities out on the landscape. But we invite you to subscribe to that form at the bottom of our homepage. And there at the bottom of the screen are, of course, are 2 ways that you can reach out to us at our program. And right now, as you might imagine, with just a week and a half left in our application cycle, what we're seeing a lot of right now in that email inbox are questions from applicants. So I will leave it there and turn it back to you, Adam. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you, Katie, for the good information. At this time, we'll be taking questions. Reminder that the recording of the webinar will include a brief summary and will be available on drought.gov and the NIDIS YouTube channel later this week. And also, if you have a moment, please fill out our post-webinar survey. Responses have been very helpful in keeping up with timely topics and updates. So far, I don't see any questions. Oh, let's see. Okay. All right, well, if there are no questions from the audience, then we can wrap things up. Here is some information on how to contact Gretel, who again is the IMW Regional Drought Information Coordinator, and information about NIDIS. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope that you found the webinar informative. Thank you.